Episode 1 of the Nourishing Nations podcast, and I am super excited that episode 1 is with the NCIF, the National Circle for Indigenous Agriculture and Food's very own Reconciliag advisor, Terry Lara. Thank you, Terry, for coming in today and spending some time with us.
I'm quite excited to be spending this time with you and seeing where the discussions lead to. Always excited about agriculture, promoting agriculture and our food sovereignty and our First Nations.
Yeah, it's a huge topic, a huge initiative that is out there and definitely on the radar a lot more than it was even 2-3 years ago. The focal point is really pushing more towards that food security, food sovereignty side. And I know you've played a lifetime in the agriculture space, and I know people would love to hear a little bit about where you came from, Terry, and what's the background with Terry Lara.
You know, what's driving me right now is when I talk to some of the First Nations on our lands that maybe had a little more, they were a little more involved in food sovereignty in their age. Like when I was growing up too, in the 60s, we had huge gardens. Almost every First Nation family on Cowes has had a garden. And that's the life of the trend I'd like to go back to, is food sovereignty. What I lived, involved in agriculture with mom and dad. Dad always made sure we had a mixed farm. He bought every kind of livestock he could, put it on the farm, and I think Mom was the best foreman he could ever have to keep us working and doing it. Getting the chores done and weeding the garden. And I remember making bales sitting on an old Massey 44 tractor when I was 9 years old, making square bales in the ditch and then going out and harrowing with that same tractor. And I just grew up on Cowes First Nation and never left the First Nation all my life. Spent every year of my life there, worked off the reserve, drove to work for many years off the reserve, and always came back home to agriculture. It was always part of my life. Even when I had full-time jobs off the First Nation, I was still involved in raising cattle or farming to a certain extent. With me and Dad, we had a custom grazing operation that we took over from the PFRA when they pulled off the First Nation. We run that as partners for 5-6 years. Then Dad had enough, so I took it over and kept it going for another 30 years after, and here I am. We got involved in community pastures or custom grazing on our First Nations and farming, and it's finally coming to be a successful venture. With the new lands we bought, unfortunately they bought a lot of marginal land that wasn't suitable for grain farming. We tried leasing it out, and we couldn't even get a fair dollar value for the land we were leasing out to the local farmers because they couldn't turn a profit on it. So we turned to fencing it and seeding it to grass and permanent cover and running cows on there. And then there was a stampede of people to come and rent that land from us. And out of that, I looked at this and I said, what's wrong with this picture here? They're all running cows on our land and we're not. So I talked to the chief and council, and they let me start off buying 25 cow-calf pairs in a bull, purebred bull. And we started off with that, and now we have 250 cow-calf pairs. And started farming 350 acres, and that eventually grew to better land, farming to better land, and now we're at 6,000 acres. So it's just the agriculture life that surrounded me as I grew up. That's what brought me to where I am now. You never stop learning. Even when I should have been retired already, I'm still learning and still enjoying it.
And even with all the obstacles and all the trials and the tribulations and everything else, it's in you. It's just the love.
Yeah, if you seek out the right people, and I always say, don't be scared to go out to knock on doors and open doors and ask for help. I have never been turned away from a door yet. I've never been turned away from anybody that wants to help me. They all want to help, and the local farmers will all give you advice. They want to see us succeed. As First Nations, that's what opens my eyes the most, is how much the local community want to see us succeed as a First Nation. They seem to enjoy watching us grow as cattle farmers and grain farmers. I actually honestly get the opinion that they want to say I had a hand helping the First Nation become self-sufficient, whether it's livestock raising or grain farming or even gardening and stuff like that. He talked about gardening to the big farmers out there that have gardens, and they say, you need help, we'll help you. It's amazing. It's amazing the amount of help that we could get just by asking.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I know the excitement, I know your story and where you've come from and everything else, but every milestone gets a little more exciting for you? Like this year when I was out there and we were on the yard site and the next day those new X9s were getting delivered, just every single stage of growth, there's still excitement in you, just like you're 14 again, getting something new.
When do you stop? Like, when do you stop when things are so exciting like that and you can see no end to the growth and no end to the empowerment of our First Nation to do what, I like to say, what was negotiated for in the treaties. What our forefathers seen us doing when they negotiated the treaties, that's what we're actually doing now. That's what I think we're doing, is they wanted us to become farmers and live like the white man. And by God, we're doing that. We're living the same life as they are. We're building our farms, we're building equity, assets, and succeeding at it. I'm learning every day. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Farming our own land instead of sitting back and letting someone else farm it and taking peanuts for it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the large things across Canada for sure, but is the amount of arable land that First Nations own that are being farmed handshake lease, or they're not getting fair market value.
Yeah.
And the barriers that exist to being able to have the capacity to be able to farm that own land to take a different direction, right?
Actually, in our farming venture here, we said, okay, if you want to do that, where's your plan? Where's your plan? What do you want to do? Let's do it.
Yeah.
It's more or less that's what the message I'm getting. Okay, let's do it. And we'll help you do it, which is, what more can you ask for?
Yeah, and I think that was, I know a lot of the conversation prior to moving over to the NCIF and being a part of an organization is that accelerator, is just to be that white glove service so that we can assist, right? So whether it's an application or it's directing through to the right mentor or whether it's reviewing documents or whatever that is, and then on top of that, coupling it with your background and your experience of actually the trials and tribulations and the getting there to a success, and then still every single milestone getting a little bit more excited and a little bit more excited, and then I think there's always that push of doing more, right? So now we're going to get a few more acres or a few more cows and all the pieces that go along with it. I think that's, for me, the driver, is just that excitement that goes along with it.
Yeah, and I'm getting some more context from neighboring First Nations, maybe a little bit more to the north and east, where they want to do a project similar to what we started at Cowessess First Nation with the 4C Ranch. They want to introduce livestock on their First Nation, and they're partnered with a local MP. And right away it got blown up real big before the first wheel even turned. So I met with the guy on the weekend and I told him, I love your idea, I love what you're presenting, but maybe you got to step back, not one step, maybe 3 steps, and start small. So get a unique group of people from 5 or 6 First Nations and let's start this co-op herd of cattle and get them really interested, doing a really good job, and set them up so there's very little room for failure. And I think that's the key to success, is make it fun and make it successful right from the first step.
Yeah, and over your journey and what has happened, what has been the uptake from the youth that's around you, whether that's family or community youth, to really start getting their hands back in the dirt?
We just got to offer them. I think we just got to offer them the opportunity to come out there and learn with us and help us, and then slowly bring the youth in. But I firmly believe we should start with the schools, introducing agriculture in the classroom right from the kindergarten up. As we get up to the high school students, then we could start bringing them out in for summer employment, the ones that are interested in agriculture, and I'm going as far as introducing scholarships for any of our grade 12 graduates that want to go into the School of Ag or into the trade school that's going to support agriculture or anything that helps our First Nation grow. But agriculture will be my focus.
Yeah, and I think the scholarship thing is huge. We were talking with an organization just this week about they've had scholarships that are out there in the ag space for Indigenous youth, and they never even had applicants. So the exposure, and I think as it grows, I think we've lost the ability for agriculture to be that sexy career. Because we don't promote it that way. Our youth still think that it's a pitchfork and it's manure and it's working in a barn, when in fact those new X9 combines that you have would be very similar to the video game they're playing in the basement right now with the buttons that are on there and the GPS and the auto steer. But we're not promoting that back. And then to your point, I think engaging them in the classroom and actually getting their hands back in the dirt and them getting excited about a different outlook than technology or video games. There's all pieces and spin-off with agriculture, whether it's mechanics or marketing or the financial side of it. It's not just about the equipment. There's so many aspects to it, but we also need that labor force to be there. So the excited Terry Laraz have a pipeline of those that are willing to come and step up and help or take over when that time comes.
Yes, definitely. The technology part of it, that's where the youth will really fit in and help. They'll get onto it much quicker than I can. We have a older guy that was a custom combiner at one time right now, and he's struggling with the technology on these new X9s and constantly seeking the support help we have from the dealership. The thing is, you never get out of your seat to do that now. There's no more getting out of your seat and getting all dusty and dirty and cranking a bolt to set your machine. It's not there no more. You push a button. And that's the exciting part that I think will draw the youth in. Sitting in an air-conditioned combine with your buddy beside you, enjoying the day. If you're really interested in stuff, you'll do a good job. That's my take on it. The new doors opening up for us, like with the satellite technology for monitoring our crops, that's a young person's career. They're reading that and using the drone system now. It's all beyond my capability of doing it. I could learn it, but why when a young person will come along and learn it and be much more successful at it than I am.
When they learn it in 5 minutes, it takes us 5 days.
And the excitement they'd have by doing that. I really think that on our First Nation, I'll speak solely for our First Nations, that we lost agriculture for 2 generations. My dad and all the local people, all the people he grew up with, they were all farmers. They all had cattle, they all had livestock, they all had horses, and they all farmed. Mind you, small farms, but then the kids, when they come home, their life revolved around that. After Dad's generation quit farming, the children didn't keep on farming. They moved away, or they got onto something else. And so now I'll say positive 2 generations for sure. We're trying to gain that agriculture drive back in our community, and that's my goal. How do we do it? And I just say get the kids excited about it in school. And
do you think it's 2 generations of lost ag, or do you think it's a couple generations in general of just lost ways of that used to be and used to experience in that traditional? It would be more than ag, I would think.
Yeah, it's more than ag. We definitely lost the ability to farm. The knowledge that comes with learning from your mom and dad as they're farming, we lost that. We also lost the drive to grow our own produce, to have the gardens, and that's where it starts from. You got to understand how plants grow, I think, and the benefits of growing them plants for food sovereignty. And that would eventually branch out into something greater, something huge. It's a huge area to recover, but why wouldn't we pursue that? We have the land base, which is the main drive for agriculture. We have the land right there in front of us. Let's use it. All we got to recover is the cost of the inputs now and the labor and stuff like that. Well, inputs are labor. Cost of production.
Yeah, and then I think too, when we talk about agriculture and we talk about that, there's so much opportunity for the traditional ag that's still a part of primary agriculture. The bees, the berries, the maple syrup, all those other pieces of ag that we typically don't think about. We think about food, fuel, and fertilizer. We think about cereal crops, pulse crops, cattle, but there's so much more to agriculture. And the people that reach out to us every week are in every aspect, from food processing to berries to bees. So for our youth and our next generation, there's so much opportunity beyond that standard box of ag.
Ag is not grain farming, wheat, it's not raising cows. It's absolutely every aspect of food production that's on the table. It includes absolutely everything. You talked about bees. Unfortunately, at my family, we have bees. We have colonies of bees, and it's pretty exciting to have. My daughter was down for a quick visit here on Tuesday. I said, good, if you're down on the weekend, we'll harvest our last batch of honey. I said, we're coming down. It's just such a great product to have in your cupboards. We haven't bought honey since I bought my first colony of bees, and it's got to be 5 years ago now. When we did buy it, we said, this honey's no good. It just doesn't compare with the stuff that you grow in your own yard. It's something, and the bees also, besides giving you honey, they're pollinators. They look after your yard. They look after the crops for 5 miles around. They'll pollinate the crops. That's how far they travel, right? And they never quit hatching, laying eggs until it freezes. It's a thriving community that's always growing colony of bees. And you talk about the berries too. And we can go so far with that if we plant our own orchards. And even if why not plant maple trees? Talking about maple syrup. They have a maple tree orchard in the valley because they grew naturally down there in the Capel Valley. Start with a small 2-3 acre plot and go from there.
Yeah.
So they grow somewhat fast. It's just, I see all the opportunities that we have to do ventures like this, and I wish I was 40 years younger to start all over again.
You might not be as excited though. If you're 40 years younger, it might not be as exciting.
That's right.
When the bees are 5 years and you get the new X9 and everything else.
Yeah. Well, we grew up, Mom made maple syrup when we were young too, because we grew up in the valley. So that was one of our chores every day, was going up out in the bush and collecting the maple sap from the little soup cans that were hanging on the trees. We had each our own route to go out there and bring it home, and Mama made our own maple syrup and cakes, whatever they're called. It's a life that I experienced that very little people on the First Nation experienced that I treasure to this day. Maybe it wasn't so exciting when I was 12, 13, 14 having to do that, but I think back on it now and I do it all over again.
What steps do you think should be taken where we are today to achieve Indigenous food sovereignty?
I honestly think it's got to start in the school. I honestly think we got to bring agriculture in the classroom, starting right at the kindergarten classes. And I thought about this so hard. I wanted to do this for so many years now. I think a greenhouse attached to our schools and getting the kids to grow their own lunch programs, grow their own vegetables that they put in their lunch. And wouldn't that be rewarding? The kindergartens grow out and harvest their own radish and lettuce for their lunch program, and just they learn to harvest just enough to what to eat. And as the kids as the grades increase, as they get up to grade 5s, maybe they could grow tomatoes and cucumber and stuff like that, and just venture to the bigger crops as they get older. And they learn about horticulture, and wouldn't that might lead to some careers for some of the people too. There's horticulturists and crop sciences. The benefits are not even explored yet of starting something like that.
And then I just think about the expansion, right? It just takes one to pilot it.
Yeah.
And I know I may not be a huge fan of tomatoes, but if my child goes to school and grows a tomato, real good chance I'm either having tomato soup or a tomato sandwich or some. I'm all of a sudden going to like tomatoes because I'm not telling them, oh no, don't eat that. And it's just I think that's the important, another aspect that youth play in this whole picture is the influence that they can have on a generation.
When I was younger, I went and helped one of the local farmers out at Grenfell put up silage, and he must like tomatoes. Because every lunchtime, that's what we got was tomato sandwiches. And they were good because they were fresh. They were picked. He let them ripen on the vine, he'd pick them and bring them to the house, wash them up and make us tomato sandwiches. And so that's great, like stuff like that. He didn't have to go to town to make lunch.
And it didn't cost that, some seeds and...
Yeah. And we grew up eating our own vegetables that Mom grew. And they last us throughout the winter because she was huge on canning too. And that's something else we'd like to bring back, is the preserving food. As we get our community gardens going. That's what we never touched on. If we start agriculture in the classroom and get these kids growing their own plants in a greenhouse beside the school, how easy would it be to get them their own little gardens outside their own house and getting them interested in that, and maybe having a farm fair in the fall time and vegetable judging. Like the opportunities are so wide ranging. It'd be easy to get the community behind us on something like that. I think if there's some kind of reward for their efforts with the gardens besides just harvesting the food.
We all like rewards.
Yeah, for sure. Competition, it's called, eh?
You always got to win, even if it's not a competition. People want to win.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to September 30th. National Day for Truth and Reconciliation.
Yeah.
On that theme, what role do you think non-Indigenous farmers play in agriculture reconciliation?
Yeah, I often wondered if it's because of the exposure of reconciliation that we're getting so much support now from our local farmers. And the banks and the lending institutions, Farm Credit, Canada, Sketch and Crop Insurance, no matter where you turn, there's offers of help. And maybe it was always there, but there was some reluctancy from our own First Nations to reach out for it. I think that was the main barrier. It wasn't that it wasn't there. It wasn't that the local farmers, non-Indigenous farmers, didn't want to help. I think it's just they were never approached to help. I think reconciliation, since it was exposed, I think it's beneficial to all First Nations, all First Nation agriculture. They want to see us use the land for what it's meant to be.
Yeah. So do you think it's more about you approaching a non-Indigenous farmer and asking for advice? Do you think it would be different and there's some sort of a fear of approach with non-Indigenous farmers to approach First Nations?
Yeah, there's a barrier there. I think we got to approach them, and then the help is there. For a non-Indigenous farmer, there's still that, I see still a little bit of unease maybe of them walking up to us and saying maybe this is how you should do stuff. There's a barrier there that I can't put my finger on yet. I prefer to do the approaching. I prefer to be the one to go out there and say, how do you set your combine for this? And how many seeds per square meter if I'm seeding canola? I think maybe the non-First Nation farmer is a little reluctant to come and offer us advice without us asking for it. There's some reluctance there, and I probably know why, but I want to say that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And how do you think we can incorporate Indigenous knowledge and practices into modern agriculture?
Indigenous knowledge and practices are so far removed from modern agriculture now. The Indigenous model would be more to do with, I could see it more to do with the weather and the frost and stuff like that. And a lot of that knowledge is lost now. We're getting so that the knowledge keepers, so that you call them now, they're not the real old-time knowledge keepers that I remember. I remember knowledge keepers that were born in the late 1800s. I still remember some of them, and up to, say, the 1920s, 1930s. Those were the knowledge keepers of Indigenous knowledge. Those are the ones that lived the old life, or that were taught by the people that lived the life before the signings of the treaties. Since the 1930s is when Mom and Dad were born. There's very little. The Indigenous content is there, but it's not the old Indigenous content. So we're slowly getting away from it. But that's why we've got to hang on to what we have. We've got to hang on to it if we want to salvage it. Like our language, we're losing our language. And there's no doubt we are going to lose it, except for the very few that really strive to keep it.
I don't rodeo like I would have 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Everything changes, and it's just about how do we adapt and keep up with those changes as they go.
Yep. You got to learn with the flow of the time. And I have these conversations with our non-First Nation members when we talk about farming. I tell them, hey, I hope you don't mind me asking you for advice. I said it like this, I hope you don't mind me picking your brain, but really I'm picking your grandfather's brain, because your dad learned from him, from his dad. So you have knowledge, a guy my age, you have knowledge that goes back 5-6 generations, farming knowledge that was handed down to you, and I'm starting from square one and trying to teach our people. I think that's the biggest challenge we have right now, is trying to regain that knowledge that we lost over the generations of our First Nations not farming. And I really don't like to say that, but some of this comes from the government restricting our First Nations to be successful in farming. When they were becoming successful, they implemented the Peasant Farm Act. They took the best farming land away from them. They said, we're here to help you farm, but really in hindsight and behind their back, they discouraged them from farming. Like I say, I don't like looking in the rearview mirror too much. I like to acknowledge it and move forward.
I think it's acknowledging it, but it still exists.
Yeah.
There is still marginalization. What advice would you give to other communities or Indigenous people that want to get into agriculture that don't have all that experience that you do?
Yeah, probably the first thing is have a plan, have a goal. Have a long-term goal. I'd say have a master plan of where you want to go, where you want to be 25 years from now. That's where I want to be. That's your master plan. and then cut that back to a long-term plan and then to a short-term plan. Your short-term plan will tell you what you have to do today and tomorrow to get to your short-term plan. It's all about planning. It starts with a dream, and make sure your dream is realistic. You're not going to be you're not going to want to be a multi-millionaire with your farm. You just want to be successful and live a good sustainable life. If that's your dream, that's very attainable. Seek out all the information you can. In today's age, in today's world, with the computer system and all the information available, why couldn't you be successful? I had to go to SciAst in the wintertime to learn about agriculture that wasn't taught to me for many years, and then and then read what I had to, like read the papers that I had to read, the Western Producer, the Country Guide, all that stuff, read them to learn what's out there, what I had to do. All that stuff is right there at your fingertips. You just gotta want it. You just gotta want it, and it's there. I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't do it myself. I'll say that over and over again. I can't tell anybody to farm if I couldn't farm, or raise cattle if I couldn't raise cattle. If there's any barriers, it might be within our own First Nation system of us individuals obtaining land to do it on. The governance systems on some First Nations are somewhat backwards, somewhat behind time. Instead of supporting the individuals, they want to support the whole community. But I say if you support the individuals and let the individuals grow up and make a lifestyle of farming, their kids are going to want to farm. The next one's going to want to farm, and pretty soon you have a pretty rich community. And that's going to take generation and generation too. But where do you start? You got to start somewhere.
It took us 7 generations to get here. We're not going to fix it in 7.
Yeah, it took us, like it was after the 1930s where I don't think the welfare system was in place. So all the local First Nations, they were farmers. They were self-sustaining. And they were getting there up into the 70s, and that's when it changed. It was implemented for a purpose. And that was to give enough for us to attain enough land for each First Nation family to be able to farm on their own, to be self-sustaining, to farm land. That's what treaty land entitlement was all about. It's not about leasing it to the non-First Nation farmer and taking revenue off that. If you make that land available to your own community members, you're going to have a richer, happier, self-sustaining community for generations. And there's enough land available for that to happen. That treaty land entitlement system that should have been our next stepping stone to self-sustaining. Mm-hmm. And with the next land deals coming up and the claims coming in, the specific claims coming in, there's no reason for success down the road if we look at it, if we deal with it right.
So, all the years growing up, born into it, building your own farm, building a community farm, what would you say is your favorite memory in your journey thus far?
Probably the livestock. If I could have kept on having the custom grazing, the community pasture concept throughout my life, that would have been the most rewarding lifestyle I ever had. Living with horses and cows and just being home. That had to be my most rewarding time in my life, when I was able to stay home every day and go out and check the 400 or 500 cows I had at my place. They weren't my cows. They were brought to my place for me to look after them. I gave the owners of the cattle my word that I would look after them, and they would get every cow back that was within my power, with my means. Yep. So I went out and I looked at cows all day long, and that was the most rewarding part of my life. Throughout the 70s and 80s, when the grasslands were really thriving. But after that, in 89 we had a drought, and I could see it going down backwards since then. The pastures going backwards, never really recovered. The only plants that kept living throughout that drought was leaf spurge. Yeah.
So a few months ago you were approached for a different position that's a little different than you're maybe used to.
Yeah.
And you came on board as the Reconciliag advisor for the National Circle. What brought you to the NCIAF?
And then when I was approached by NCIAF to come and help the team here, I was already in farming. I had my cows. I built a good genetic herd of my cows. And I was given the opportunity to help other First Nations, other individual band members do exactly what I did, to have a satisfying lifestyle for myself and my kids. I wanted to see other people, other First Nation members do the same, have the opportunity to. That's what brought me to NCIF when I was approached. I said, wow, look, I could help other people. I could open their eyes, open doors for them. By then, 4C Farms was already starting to get in gear. The wheels were already started turning. And I had a few contacts from other First Nations for me to go over and talk with them. How could we start farming like you guys did? When NCIAF approached me to come on board with this team here, I thought, there's my opportunity. There's my opportunity to help other First Nations. I thought it was just in 3D4 to start off, and I'll tell you that. That's what I thought I was walking in here. I could help my neighbors in George Gordon First Nation or in Keesikos or White Bear Pheasant Drum, wherever in Saskatchewan. And I walked in the door and here, no, it's not just 3D4. It's not just Saskatchewan. It's across Canada. It's a national circle. And is that ever exciting? It's helping our generations today and tomorrow and the future to realize the power of the treaties in becoming self-sustaining. That's probably the most important thing to me now in the future.
Yeah,
And
self-sustaining and food security.
Yeah. That means a lot. It means a lot to see that money and the benefits of the land staying within the community instead of being taken out and used to build a farm off the reserve. That's the big thing. I seen what our land could give us compared to that little meager $1 per acre rent that we're getting. It's much greater than that. It's huge.
And so much more than the dollar value.
Yeah,
it's the outcome,
yeah.
It's the learning, it's the education, it's the growth of the community.
The assets we build, the bins we build, yeah, the buildings to it, the equipment we buy, yeah, the training we'll give our workers now. This year, 2024 is the first year we put in our 6,000 acres of crop with all First Nation employees. And sure, we had one employee that ain't a Cowessess member of the crew, but still First Nation.
Still First Nation.
And we retained him. He's proven he's worth keeping. And yeah, if we could do that and train our own First Nation members the values of farming, and then maybe give them a little piece of land to farm and help them along, coach them along, it's just rewarding.
Advice that you would give to a young Indigenous person in Canada who's thinking about getting into agriculture, what would your first initial piece of advice you'd give them?
Do it. First, most honest thing I could tell them is do it. It's so rewarding. Just do it. If that's what you want to do it, and don't look back. Ask for all the help that you want. It's out there, and I'm sure it'll be successful. You'll be rewarding, and so will your family and future generations. That's what the land was put there for, was for our First Nations to use, and it's a healthy, rewarding lifestyle. I'd rather be walking on that good piece of ground, good piece of dirt, than walking on cement.
Yeah,
Out
with your
there,
hands in the dirt.
Yeah, it's rewarding. Like one day in springtime, I walked out of my house and the cows were in the corral and calves were being born, and it might have been one of the first day that the crows got back and the birds were singing and the crows were making noise and the cows were there looking at the cows, and what a beautiful thing to walk out to.
Yeah, tough gig.
Yeah,
Tough gig.
yeah. I'll always remember that. When they're my cows, when they're your cows, your calves on the ground, and you walk out early in the morning and the birds are singing and the cows are happy, they're laying around. If they're laying down, they're happy. If they're not walking, if they're not looking at you, bawling at you, yelling for food, you know you're doing a good job. That's rewarding. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We like to close out all our podcasts with a rapid fire. So I am going to put out a word, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear this word.
We'll give it a try.
Okay, so the first word's agriculture.
Success.
Community.
Happiness.
Food security.
Wealth.
Climate change.
Look out.
Sustainability.
Yeah, health lifestyle.
Healthy lifestyle. And reconciliation. Open indoors.
Yep.
That is amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, that is episode 1 of the Nourishing Nations podcast. I'm your host, Chris McKee. Big thank you to Terry Lara for coming in, spending some time with us today. We love seeing him in the office. We love working alongside him, and just look forward to the future. So stay tuned for your next episode of Nourishing Nations podcast, and thanks for tuning in.